You're listening to episode number 17 of the Wellness Real Estate Podcast. Have you heard of the term Agrihood before? It's a fairly new concept of neighborhood for many forward-thinking developers across the country. It's a community design bringing people and agriculture together in a suburban setting. It's a fast-growing trend because of all the amazing benefits that it brings to the residents, and I'm super excited today to have one of these forward-thinking developers here on the show. Brian Grover, a resident of Encinitas, California, founded Nolen Communities with the intent of building communities that encourage placemaking, interaction, and a sense of community that we have lost by virtue of how housing projects and communities have been built in the past 40 to 50 years. He has recently proposed developing an Agrihood in his hometown. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with where Encinitas is located, it's a beach town in North San Diego County. The new development is a 21-acre site that contained a commercial greenhouse or many commercial greenhouses and one single-family home surrounded by suburban residential communities. And he's proposed a new Agrihood called Fox Point Farms that was unanimously approved by City Council and is scheduled to be completed in late 2023. As a real estate agent, it's important to stay on top of the development trends. Wellness real estate developments are one of those fast-growing trends worth talking about with your clients. Not only does it provide you an easy, free-flowing conversation that are topics that are still about real estate, it positions you as a forward-thinking agent who understands where real estate of the future is headed. So let's get to this interview with Brian. You're going to learn all about the components of this exciting new community called Fox Point Farms. Let's grow. Welcome to the Real Estate Marketing Podcast, where we explore a unique strategy no one is talking about that will enable you to engage more people with authentic conversations about your business more often. And it's called Wellness Real Estate. Not sure what that is or how it can help you as an agent? Well, that's what this podcast is all about. In fact, Wellness Real Estate is growing so rapidly that it is projected to be nearly $870 billion by 2027. I'm Sheila Alston, and I'm your host. I'm also the founder of Healthy Home Media, where I help agents all over the country leverage this new trend in the industry to spark new conversations that will get people to listen to you and notice your brand. So if you're tired of spinning your wheels without any leads or sales to show for it, then stay tuned. I guarantee this podcast is not like any you've heard before. Welcome to the Wellness Real Estate Podcast. So, hello, Brian. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to learn more about Fox Point Farms. But before we go there, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the story of how you came up with the concept.
Yeah, sure. So my company is Nolen Communities, and we started just right around 5 years ago. And prior to that, I had been working as a consultant with a lot of developers, mostly here in San Diego. And a couple of the projects that I had been working on at the time were starting to get a little more creative than your typical suburban development project. 150 units, and here's a park, and boom, let's get it approved and build houses. They were starting to be a little more creative, a little more interested in placemaking, I think, because they saw that the market was starting to demand those things. And one of those projects was called North River Farms in Oceanside. It's still going through the motions. I think you and I had talked about that on our last call. But I was a consultant on that project for 8 years at the time.
Wow.
And so I thought this is a really, really cool concept. Some of the folks that they had brought into that team, like the Ecology Center, they were working with the folks who did Rancho Mission Viejo. Mm-hmm. It was just a really cool process, and honestly a breath of fresh air for me to see a developer interested in creating, an on-site farm and a brewery and things that you don't normally see in these master planned, generally boring communities. So that's sort of where a light bulb went off in my head. Hey, I'd really like to do one of these myself. And maybe we'll talk later during this about just my general motivations for starting Nolen Communities. Yeah. Which were, to summarize, kind of expanding upon what developers do today and trying to, take it to the next level, knowing that consumers want that. And so anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying I'd worked on a project or two back in the day that I saw going in this direction, and I decided to take it, 5 steps further with this project.
Yeah, no, I love it because it's exactly what the community needs too. I know you mentioned something about placemaking. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, good question. So our company, Nolen Communities, is named after John Nolen. John Nolen was a planner back in the early 1900s, and I'm a planning dork. I got my master's degree in urban planning and urban design and real estate development. So I know all these, Jane Jacobs and John Nolen and all these, people that you learn about who were, movers and shakers back in the day from a planning standpoint. So John Nolen's big thing was placemaking. He did the original plan for downtown San Diego. He did the original plan for Balboa Park, for the Embarcadero. And his big thing was, okay, you've got people living here and people living here, and you've got, transportation corridors here, here, and here. Where's the sense of place? How do you connect all of that? And especially nowadays with higher density housing projects kind of becoming the standard as we move away from the suburban sprawl of post-war suburbia, placemaking becomes much more important. If you live in a little 1,200 square foot, apartment or condo or townhome or whatever it might be, where do you go outside to kick a soccer ball with your kid? Where do you go play catch? Where do you go interact with your neighbors? Where do you do things outside of the 4 walls of your house? That's generally, what we view as placemaking. And that's part and parcel to our business model at Nolen.
Yeah, I love it because really, like you were mentioning, the post-war era, I mean, everybody was building these homes where we're kind of sequestered to ourselves and we're not encouraged to make friends or interact with our neighbors. And it makes it a lonely place to be, right?
Yeah, no, and that's, I forget if you and I had talked about this, a couple months ago when we first chatted, but one of the things that I like to talk about a lot is like the generational shift in the way that like my parents were raised versus the way that I was raised versus the way that my children are going to be raised. And, commensurate with that, the values that we have, the desires that we have, the way that we, desire to live. And so it's really interesting to look at, like my parents, for example, their view of success, especially when I was growing up, was having a big house for us to grow up in, having a backyard that we could play in. And, there was that whole keeping up with the Joneses type of thing. Also, oh, the neighbor just got a, Mercedes. We can't afford a Mercedes, but that's, something that we're thinking about, like why we need to keep up. And that's largely that generation who grew up in the 50s and the 60s and even the early 70s, they think like that. And I think my generation and generations that are growing up right now are almost the opposite. It's like, I don't want private backyards. I don't want a private pool. I don't want, all these things for myself. I want community. I want a place. I want to live in a place where I can do things with my neighbors, where my kids can play with my neighbors' kids, where we have a communal pool, a communal farm, a communal this, a communal that, sort of going back to how people used to live a long time ago. And so that's just so interesting to me. And one of the things that we are doing with Fox Point Farms is we're kind of like, it's a social experiment, right? We're doing a lot of things in that project where we take the backyard and we put it in the front, and we take the front yard and we put it in the back. We don't have fences where homes would normally have fences. Everything is open. If you want to go, play catch with your kid, you're going to have to go where other people will be. You don't have a private space to do that. And the types of people that we expect to want to live in this community embrace that, myself included, and my family. So it just, the whole social component of this is really, really interesting to me. And I think in the real estate development community, which is, my profession, so many people just focus on, we need this many bedrooms, we need this many square feet, you need a roof, you need a garage. Families typically have this many cars, so we need, that's how a lot of people think. and to actually introduce the social component of it. You know, what would happen if we took away the fences in the front yard? What would happen if we took the backyard and put it in the front? And
Oh
people
my
are going to lose it. You know, when people
Yeah.
come walk our models in 6 months, some people I think are going to realize that it's not a fit for them, because they value that privacy. And you know what I'm talking about with generational shifts and all that, that's just speaking in generalities. There are younger folks who still want private space, and I totally respect that. It's just not something that we can offer with this community. So it'll be really interesting once people start moving in and start learning how to live in a community like this.
Well, it's interesting just because you're shaking it up, and it's going to be nice to have a different alternative for people that are wanting something different, right?
Yeah.
So
for sure.
I mean, and you're considered a wellness community. I don't know if you've heard about wellness real estate. I know we talked a little bit about it, but Agrihoods are considered to be a wellness development because you're intentionally bringing these components. They're going to bring about kind of more holistic living component to the residents from the planning and the initial, you know, design of the whole development. You're not just adding a pool and then saying that it's supporting a healthy lifestyle. You've got a whole bunch of design elements included in the planning. So I'm excited to learn more about this. So tell us more about Fox Point Farms. How many homes?
Sure. Yeah, so Fox Point Farms is it's under construction right now. We just finished demolition of the greenhouses that were on the site, and we are starting grading in a couple of days. It's 250 homes, all for sale, with the exception of 40 homes, which will be rentals. So 210 for sale, 40 rentals. The rentals are all deed restricted at the very low income category. And yeah, I think we have more than 20 different floor plans, and those range from, you know, some smaller kind of like junior 1-bedroom studio type of units that are right around 700 square feet, 740 square feet, all the way up to 1,600 square foot, 3-bed, 3-bath, 2-car garage, that kind of thing. And again, going back to that social aspect that I was talking about a few minutes ago, we have been very deliberate in creating living situations where you can have, you know, multi-generational living, you can have aging in place, and most importantly, a diversity of home buyers, of you know, members of our community. So an example would be, we have these cottage units. There's 20 of them along the western portion of the site. Those are our biggest homes, detached 2-story cottage units. And right behind them is the garage for the cottage unit, as well as what would traditionally be a granny flat on top. And you see that all the time here, you know, accessory dwelling units. In some cases, accessory dwelling units are on top of the garage for the main unit. But what we've done is we've created those as separate condos. So you can buy both of them, or you can buy one of them, and then you can have a complete stranger living in the other unit. And there's private spaces for both of those, and private garages. So the granny flat would have 1-car garage. The main home would have a 2-car garage. They're right next to each other, but they're their own spaces. But you could also have, you know, 2 kids or 1 kid living in the granny flat and the parents living in the cottage unit, or vice versa. You could have, you know, like for my situation, for example, my wife and I and our baby girl are going to be living in the cottage unit, and fingers crossed, she doesn't fully know yet, but my mother-in-law really wants to move, and we intend for her to live, you know, in the carriage unit right behind us. So that's just an example. There's so many different ways that you can spin that, though, and that's just for 2 product types that we have. We also have quite a few townhomes. We have some townhomes that front the farm. We have some townhomes internal. We also have flats. So for folks who don't really need the direct access to the garage, it's more of like an apartment style of living where you're on a 1-level flat, but you do have your own private garage space, and you walk through a corridor and get into your unit. Some of those front in this space right behind me here. which is our ag amenity area, which is where you can go and throw a ball and kick a soccer ball and watch a bluegrass concert on a Friday night, or watch a kids movie on a Saturday night, or just go lay down a towel and read a book. You know, we have some really cool units, these ones right here, that, you know, you'll have a different type of home buyer for all these types of homes. And again, that was very intentional. And if you look at a lot of these other master plan communities, even though they have several different product types, you get a very clear demographic moving into all of those homes.
Yeah.
This community is for starter families. This community is for empty nesters. This community is, you know, all apartments. It's for young tech entrepreneurs. Fox Point is for anyone. I've had a lot of people calling me who are now on our interest list saying, I live in Olivenhain, or I live in the county, or I live in Elfin Forest, or whatever it might be, in a 5,000 square foot house. I live the way that you have designed this community. I have my own community garden, etc. Just finished college, and this house is way too big. I want to move into a 2-bedroom, 1-bath place, and you guys offer exactly what I want. So I think we're going to have, it's not set on a certain demographic. I think we're going to have a lot of folks, a lot of baby boomers moving in. We'll probably have a whole contingent of folks that love golf, and we've got the golf course right across the street.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful. Hard to say, but yeah.
Well, and I see that you have sidewalks. So maybe you can talk about, because it looks like you've planned this community to incorporate things to get people outside. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So we have, I guess the biggest community feature that we have from a walkability standpoint is we have a loop trail that goes around the entire property. I forget it's maybe like a mile and a half total. Goes around the farm, it goes past our animal enclosure where we have our goats and our chickens and that kind of thing. And then we also have a lot of corridors internally going along our amenity spaces. So where we have our internal community gardens, there's paths on both sides of that. We have a dog park on site. The loop trail goes right past the dog park. So, where I live, for example, when I go to walk the dog or go for a run or go for a walk with my family in the evenings at sunset, whatever it might be, we walk out of our community and we just walk around the larger neighborhood. In here, you can do that. You can go walk there's really nice trails going around Encinitas Ranch Golf Course, but you can also just walk within your community, and there's quite a bit going on. You can grab a coffee at the farm stand. You can do a couple loops around the loop trail and then go get dinner at our restaurant on site. You can do a couple loops around and then go feed the goats. You can watch sunset over the Magdalena Ecke Preserve. There's enough going on in the community that you don't really have to be drawn outside of it. And again, that also was very intentional. And the space that you see behind me here, our community green, where we would have these movies and these, bands playing and events and all of that. That's another, you don't have to get in your car and leave our community and go to a park. We have a park. Right. So, I'm also, I mentioned earlier, I'm a planning junkie. And so multimodal transportation, getting people out of their cars, keeping people from having to do all of these trips to these places is pretty important to me from a planning and urban design and placemaking standpoint. And, I think with sorry, you asked a question about sidewalks and I've sort of gone full circle.
No, it's wonderful because you're getting people outside to walk on the sidewalk. It's not just sidewalks, and they have a place to walk to. You mentioned the coffee stand in the restaurant and the farm. Are they going to be able to access the farm to buy, vegetables?
Yes. Yeah. So we have a 5.5 acre farm. And what we're going to do there, it's going to be commercially run. So the residents don't go in there and do their own farming. We have a separate community garden closer to the residential units that will be for that purpose. But the farm will be a full commercial farm production, regenerative, organic, the whole 9 yards. We'll have chickens on site that are regenerating the soil. Those chickens are also going to be laying eggs. We're going to be putting those eggs in our CSA boxes for residents. We're also going to be using those eggs in the restaurant. We're also going to be using those chickens in the restaurant. We're going to be using all the produce in the restaurant. So it's all, the more we can keep that on site and internal, the better. This is intended to be a community farm for this community and for Encinitas Ranch. We don't intend to do any distribution, and we are trying to minimize the amount of things that we pull in for the restaurant. So anyway, another full circle way of answering your question, but the short answer is yes, all of the produce grown on the farm will be available at our farm stand, just like you would buy produce at a grocery store. Only our grocery store is much smaller. And it's also available in CSA boxes where you can get, every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, you can be part of our CSA program, or you can just go to the restaurant and, eat farm fresh food while you're looking at the farm where that food came from. And
That's so
I've
cool.
seen a lot of this whole farm to table, I don't know what you would call it, trend, which is very cool, by the way. I love that all these restaurants are sourcing locally and all that. But I've yet to see, this application where you actually have farm to table on site. The farm is visible from the table. There's a couple places down in Valle de Guadalupe that have done a pretty good job of that. But even those, their farms are pretty small, and it's usually like an herb garden or microgreens or something like that. It's not the bulk of what they're selling and what they're feeding you at their restaurant. And so we're trying to do something unique.
Yeah, well, it is unique because most of these big commercial farms are so far out. Nobody is wanting to live that far out, but Encinitas is near the beach. I mean, how many miles away from the beach are you?
Oh, that's a good question. I should know the answer. I want to say 1.5 miles, 2 miles.
Yeah, not far at all. That's amazing. Yeah. So is the restaurant going to be available to people that don't live in Fox Point Farms? Is it going to be open to the public?
Yep. Yeah. So this whole area that you see behind me, that community green, the restaurant, the farm stand, access to the farm through guided tours, all of that is available to anyone, the public, residents of Fox Point, whoever it might be.
Okay. So it's not going to be a gated community.
Oh, no. Don't get me going.
Okay. That's wonderful. So you mentioned a little bit when you worked on those other projects that there was, you worked on it for many years. And I know that some of that is because the neighboring residents maybe have wanted their say in the planning. Did you come across any, neighboring, neighbors that had negative feedback about this community, or did you have to make changes to kind of make people happy?
Yeah, good question. Yes, we did. There's an existing neighborhood called Fox Point immediately west of our community. And I guess to take a step back, one of the things that I've learned in this line of business as a developer, and the name developer immediately has a negative connotation. And I don't know when that started, but I'm also not debating, I think it's generally for good reason. Developers are viewed as outside money coming in that just wants to, plow some property and put up sticks and bricks. And they usually don't have a lot of regard for community character, aesthetics, fitting into the existing fabric, those types of things. So I understand the sentiment. It's just something that whenever I go into a project, people usually hate me right off the bat. And that was definitely the case with this community of Fox Point. And they were just fearful. And some of them still are. But I'm happy to say that, over this 4-ish year process, I've become pretty good friends with a lot of them. They've learned to cautiously trust me. They give me a little bit longer leash every week, every month. And, so long as I'm showing good faith on my side of the table, they show good faith on their side. And, I think this project was a really good example of how you can work, positively with a community and answer their questions, give them the things we made so many changes to our project based on input from the community, but we drew a line of, for example, one of the things that a couple of those neighbors were asking for was a 6-foot tall cinder block wall along the western part of our property because they wanted to be completely separate. And we drew a line there. We said, we're not gonna do that. That's not what this community is about. This is about inclusivity and connectedness. You want to be connected to your neighborhood, not completely walled off. Not going to do that. But other things that they wanted, like privacy landscaping, because we were adding in a trail, and some of the neighbors had concerns about our residents, being able to see into their backyards and into their bedrooms and things like that. Those are totally valid concerns, and so we respected those and adapted our plan accordingly. So anyway, the long and short of it is, yes, a lot of the neighbors were very fearful and frustrated and upset when we approached them about this project. But now I'd say there's maybe 3 or 4 neighbors who are still just upset. And most everybody else is excited to see this done and wants to come visit and wants to walk around on our trails and come to our farm stand and come see our animals and come to the restaurant. So yeah,
and be
I'm
able to
pretty
walk
happy
to a restaurant instead of driving to a restaurant, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So
that's amazing.
I'm happy with how all of that turned out, and it took a lot of effort, but it was well worth it.
Well, because what was existing there was a huge greenhouse. It's like 21 acres. Is that what you said? And it was a commercial greenhouse operation that was there before.
Correct. Yeah.
So some people might think, it's agriculture, you're taking away the agriculture. And what is your response to that?
Yeah, so there's, this came up at some of our early city council hearings when we had proposed this Agrihood concept. And there's a common misconception, I would say, among the public and among decision makers that agriculture and open space are the same thing. We were butting up against that quite frequently. And then there's another misconception that commercial agriculture is some sort of, like asset to a neighborhood. And this property was a great example. If I asked 9 out of 10 neighbors would say, we've never even seen inside those greenhouses. We don't know what's being grown there. We don't know what it looks like inside. It's a private property. It's fenced off. We don't interact with that agriculture. And that's just 9 out of 10 is being conservative. Only people who have been in there are, people who knew the prior owner or people who were going to buy flowers commercially. So that was a big struggle for us, this notion that, a commercial agricultural flower growing operation is the same as a public park. It's not. Never been to this site because it's a commercial, almost semi-industrial operation, right? There's semi-trucks here all the time. And so anyway, it took a while to explain the difference between that type of agriculture and what we are building now.
And what you are building now is going to give them access to it.
Community-based, community-driven agriculture. You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can interact with it, you can volunteer on the farm. It's completely different. And I think that's when people say we want to preserve our agriculture, I think that's the type of agriculture that they're picturing, right? Some pretty, kale and leafy greens and tomatoes in a field with sun shining down on them. That's not the reality of commercial agriculture, especially in the United States today. We are barely, on these smaller farms, we're barely competing with other countries. And that's why all these farms are going away. The cost of labor has skyrocketed. We can't really compete. And so the only way that I think you can sustain these smaller farms in the way that people want them sustained is by adding in housing, a restaurant, a farm stand, programming the farm, right? Build in the buyers and you can make it work.
Well, and so I wonder, I mean, what an amazing opportunity for the little children that get to live in this neighborhood, right? To just kind of go back to our roots, maybe about how our grandkids were raised, or I mean, our grandparents were raised a long, long time ago, where they knew their neighbors, they just played in the neighborhood and there's farm fresh food. And are you going to have an education component where they get to learn about growing food at the farm, or a center like that at all?
Yes. Yeah, of course. So when you started that question, it made me think, I have a little 6-month-old daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and watching how kids have been growing up over the last 5-10 years with Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and whatever else there is out, basically just being on an iPad.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a big concern for parents who are raising kids now, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out the type of world that my daughter is going to grow up in 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And it scares the shit out of me. Is it going to be in the metaverse? What is the
Right.
metaverse? Are people just going to be
Like
in this
that.
virtual world with goggles on, sitting in their rooms all day?
Right.
And that is very scary. And I think it's unfortunately a reality. And so,
They might be, sorry to interrupt, but they might have their goggles on picturing a farm and seeing what it's like to grow.
Exactly.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
One of my best friends, every summer, he's a professional photographer, and he goes up to the San Juan Islands, and he works for Oculus, and he is creating, this virtual experience with, with killer whales, so that in the virtual world, people who, and there are positive, and sorry, I'm getting off way on a tangent here, but I'll bring it back. There are people who just can't go and experience those things for whatever reason. So there is a positive aspect to doing this, allowing older folks to be able to just virtually experience these things that they otherwise wouldn't see. But it's also a scary reality that is coming very soon. And so knowing that my daughter and a lot of other people's children are going to be growing up in this brave new world, how do we bring back some of the positive things about, as you said, the way that our grandparents and great grandparents were raised, which was basically on a community farm. If you trace back to the 1800s and even the early 1900s, what we're building here is the way that everybody just lived. You had to grow your own food. You had to rely on other people. You had to help other people. So anyway, yes, that is a large part of my motivation in this, and you'll see that in a lot of aspects of the community. Being a new father, there's a lot of focus on education for younger children, and education for adults. Sometimes adults need more education than children, but there is a big component of that. We are partnering up with local nonprofits. We're partnering up with the Coastal Roots Farm just down the street from us. We're partnering up with the Rob Machado Foundation, just partnerships all over the place to encourage education.
Well, it's wonderful because little kids are the best. I mean, if you show them vegetables and want them to eat it, they might not eat it. But if you have them grow the vegetable and teach them and they're looking at it, they're going to want to try it. It's the easiest way to get kids to eat vegetables.
Yep. And the irony about that is, if you teach kids the value of healthy eating and, growing locally and, sustaining a hyper local food system, they'll go home and they'll teach their parents.
Yeah. Well, the parents who just think it's easier to make the chicken nuggets and just fries and not any vegetables, if the kids are asking for it, of course, then they'll make a healthier meal. It's going to push them to be a little bit healthier too. And walk me over to Joey's house that's down the street, okay. And then they're walking, and walking the dogs and things. That's amazing.
And I think that we have a pretty, people who move into a community like this are largely going to be drawn to it because of the way we've designed it. But honestly, I hope that we get, a few residents and even members of the public that come visit our farm and visit our farm stand and our restaurant that, do go to McDonald's and buy chicken nugget meals. And that's how they are, so that we can, help the pendulum shift.
Mhm.
Having a bunch of like-minded people in the community that are like, yep, I already do that. We're not really
Mhm.
changing anything. We're just
Mhm.
inhibiting the behavior that they already had.
Mhm.
So it'll be really cool to get some folks in here and watch their behavior shift, hopefully.
Well, yeah, and I don't know the stats behind these studies, but I know that I've heard them before, that multi-generational living and just being, everybody's been segmented, like you said. Here's the elderly home, where it can be really quiet and all the, people over 55 can live a certain area. And then the single family homes are all the kids with young families live there. I mean, I just feel like bringing everybody together allows people to just connect more with different ways of thinking and different ways of living, and you can support each other much more. And the growing population, or the growing older population, just has, I think, a little bit more support, instead of just feeling like they're left out and nobody cares about them anymore.
Yeah, no, and we have thousands of people on our interest list at this point, and a good amount of folks who have signed up and who have reached out to me are either retired or near retirement. I mentioned empty nesters, and a lot of these people have the means to kind of live wherever they want, live in a larger house, in a detached home instead of attached housing, but they're so drawn to this sense of community that they don't have at all, right? In that large house out in Olivenhain or in Rancho Santa Fe or whatever, they're completely isolated. And if there's no kids in the house, or if there's no family surrounding you, you want community to be that family. And so I think that's, a lot of them want to volunteer. They're asking, how can I help? How can I volunteer on the farm? Can I help you with this? Here's what I did in my past life. Can some element of that be applicable to what you're doing here? They just want to be a part of it. And that makes all of the last 5 years of, hard work and, really tough process, getting this project approved by the city and getting residents to understand what we were doing. It makes it all worthwhile to hear people kind of validate what we've envisioned. And I really can't wait until they're out there experiencing it in real time.
Well, yeah, and I think it's perfect timing. I mean, with this pandemic and everybody being isolated in their homes and not being able to be around people, I think people now really do understand how important community is to them, and how important it is to get together with other people and friends. You miss that if you're just sequestered in isolation, and we've been doing it to ourselves for many, many years and just not realizing it. When my kids were little and we sent them to school, I remember the principal, when my oldest was in kindergarten, and there were all these parents asking about the curriculum, for kindergarten, like really, because they're thinking about college when their kids are in kindergarten, and wanting to make sure that they have all these, special, that they're going to be learning the right things to get them into the college of their dreams. And I remember the principal saying, we have all that, but what you're going to find that when your kid graduates after 8th grade, that they are going to, what you're going to love most about this school is the sense of community. And it's not what really people talk about, but it is. And, when you do have young kids, it's a perfect chance for you to make friends with all the parents of the other kids. But as the kids get older, it's hard to have community unless you meet people at work, or unless you meet people, and if you're involved in other associations and things like that, it is hard to make friends. So this is a wonderful opportunity, I think, for people to get to know the people that they live near. And I think that there's studies that have shown that people will stay if they have friends near, they won't want to move. So
yeah, no, again, going back to the whole social component that I mentioned earlier in our discussion, and I right now, for the last 15 years, I've lived in high density housing in a townhome. I don't have a front porch. I don't have a backyard. And so, I'm kind of drawing on my own experiences of how do I interact with people in my community, right? The only way that I directly interact with people in my community is when I've got my garage door open and I'm working on my bike, or doing something with my surfboards, or getting my camping gear ready for my next trip. And my other neighbor opens their garage door and it's like, oh, wow, okay, I've never
Hi.
met you. Let's talk. And
Yeah.
that's a byproduct of this post-war suburban, creating all these private spaces. Like, why is that the only opportunity for us to get to
Mhm.
know our neighbors? It's just poor design, really.
Mhm.
And so, and where I live currently, the only community amenity we have is a pool area. And so when you're there, you meet people, but otherwise it's just by happenstance, right? You're out on a
Mhm.
walk, you bump into one of your neighbors, you think you saw them driving in when they were coming home from work. So you're like, hey, are you my neighbor? It's just this you almost have to really seek it.
Mhm.
And again, with projects like Fox Point Farms and even some of the other projects that we're doing at Nolen, it's trying to not make that a forced experience. It just happens. You
Mhm.
can't not know your neighbors in a community like this. If you're sitting on your front porch of your house, your neighbors
Yeah.
are literally walking past you. You don't have that sense of privacy that you would have in another setting. If you're grilling, your grill isn't in your backyard. It doesn't fit.
Mhm.
Your grill's in your front yard. And all your neighbors are going to be walking past you saying, oh, where'd you get that? Smells really good. Whatever it might be. Your
Yeah.
kids are playing out front. They're not playing out back.
Yeah.
So all these little nuances are, I think really important to breaking what we've been doing for the last 30 or 40 years from a land development standpoint, and getting back to the way our great grandparents and their great grandparents lived communally.
Well, I interviewed Garni Nygren from Serenbe,
Yeah.
and that was one of the very first Agrihoods. And she said that they don't even plan stuff for the weekend because they literally know that they're going to go on a walk and they're going to run into so-and-so who's going to invite them to so-and-so, do this. And she says they're so busy every single weekend with fun things to do. And it's never planned. It's just, it unfolds naturally because of the friends that they have in the community. People want to stay in the community, all the the amenities that they've created in that community. It's like a little village. It's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And but one of the things, you talking about Serenbe for some reason reminded me of this. Going to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
In communities like this, all the kids usually go to the same school, same
Mm-hmm.
elementary school, same middle school, same high school, before they go off to college. And usually you just see a long string of cars going to the same school. We
Mm-hmm.
have, as part of Fox Point Farms, we have a school bus that
Oh.
just for our community, and it takes all of our kids to school. And in addition to that, we're going to have it's called a walking school bus, where you basically have parent liaisons, taking kids on foot or on bike to school. The school's a little over a mile away. It's right down the
Yeah.
street. Safe streets, no arterials. So
Yeah.
little things like that, right? It cuts down on automobile trips, but it also, gets those kids together in a way that kids used to always take the bus to school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but that doesn't happen anymore. So
you just see a long line of parents just waiting to pick up.
yeah,
That's amazing.
And Serenbe, you mentioned Serenbe. That's a great. Obviously, we studied Serenbe extensively as one of the first Agrihoods that was developed, and the original farmer there, Farmer D, Darren Jaffe, was our consultant in our farm design. He used to live here in Encinitas. Awesome. He just moved back to Serenbe actually
did he?
a year ago, and so he's living there with his family. But we learned a lot from the Serenbe experience.
That's great. Well, I'm so excited. Where do people go if they want to learn more about Fox Point Farms?
You can go to our website, which is nolencommunities.com, Nolen.
Okay.
And then on our website, there's a little button in the upper right-hand corner that says interested. And if you click on that, that'll get you on our interest list. If anybody wants to just learn more about the project and see some of our renderings and that type of stuff, you can just go to our projects page on our website and you'll see Fox Point Farms.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Okay, well, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for telling us all about Fox Point Farms. I'm really excited to see it. When is it going to be completed and ready?
So we are starting vertical construction in July is our current schedule. I'm going to try to beat that, but that's what we're currently planning on, is starting vertical construction in July. I would imagine that our first home sales and first occupancy will be Right around this time next year, maybe a little bit earlier, next winter.
Okay. 2023.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian. It was such a great conversation, and I just loved everything that you said, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, no, thank you. After so many years of, pushing papers around, it's really nice to get to finally talk about the community.
Yeah, and now you have a little girl that gets to live there. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect.
No, it's been a
Okay.
pleasure chatting with you. And yeah, if anybody has any questions or if you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, we'll be featuring you in the magazine in April, and I will be putting this on both podcasts that I have, the one for real estate agents and the one for that's Blooming a Healthy Home by Design.
Okay.
Thank you so
Very
much.
cool. Thank you,
Okay.
Chanel.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you learned something new that will inspire you to think about your branding and how you can market yourself a little differently. If you enjoyed this episode, then you're going to love what I have for you, because you don't need to wait to go get extra certifications or to grow and expand your network to get started attracting those new leads right now. You can simply begin by talking about wellness real estate trends and what you've learned on this podcast with others. I mean, this is pretty interesting stuff that no one has heard about, and I have all the tools that can make it even easier for you. Wellness Real Estate Magazine is a brand new wellness lifestyle magazine, and it's the only magazine that brings health and home together. We educate readers on industry trends and how to create a healthier home environment, written by industry experts around the country. And we have 3 covers to choose from: Wellness RE, Healthy Home, and Wellness at Home, so you can easily find one that aligns with your unique brand and messaging. These magazines are the perfect done-for-you tools that help you not only stay top of mind, but they educate and engage your audience, which positions you as an industry expert. Differentiate yourself and grow your brand the easy way. Learn more at healthyhomemedia.com.